Hey, I'm Jack Gately, and welcome back to the 1620 Today podcast. I'm your host. Our beautiful co-host, Beth, is not with us for this episode. She'll be back in the next episode. She has returned from her vacation just within the hour from her undisclosed secret location, and she'll be back at the next edition. Remember, the 1620 Today podcast is at Spotify, YouTube, or on Facebook at 1620 Today. That's all one word. Or you can read it at 1620today.com. So covering issues in Plymouth, I'm really happy to tell you that we have one of the most controversial issues currently facing the town. I think a little controversy. And that is the proposal to build a racetrack off of Exit 5 in Plymouth at what is known as the County Woodlot. And joining us today, we're very fortunate to have in the studio Tripp from Plymouth and the leader of the investment group that is proposing this project, Vincent Gabbert. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks so much for coming today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And of course, many of you know Loring as prior elected official here in Plymouth with the planning board, correct?
Correct.
And we're really glad to have you, gentlemen. This proposal kind of came from, nobody was kind of in Plymouth looking for a racetrack. And then all of a sudden, you guys came forward with this RFP for this county woodlot about a month or so ago. And at least that's when, it kind of hit the newspaper, so to speak. So I wanted to have you here today in this kind of a longer format so you guys can have an opportunity, just like any guests, to kind of explain what you really want to build. So what do you want to do? What's the plan?
First of all, thanks for having us. But I think the plan is still yet to be determined. We know what we want some of the anchor tenants essentially to be. We feel very confident in a great model for thoroughbred racing, unlike what most people have experienced or know. So for those that are listening or that are familiar with racing, I would encourage them to forget about everything they think they know about it. And what we want to create here is very different. From that standpoint, but part of this process is we just want to listen. We don't know exactly what is going to be the entirety of the project because we want to make sure that we're filling the needs of the community. We want to make sure that we're listening to folks here in Plymouth and putting a project that everybody can be proud of, but also drives tourism and economic development and all of the other ancillary benefits with an investment of this caliber.
But you are talking about a horse race track. That's this key component.
Yeah, absolutely. And we feel like that, given the history and the tradition that exists here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for thoroughbred racing, the fact that we haven't had any live racing here for a number of years, we feel like that this is an untapped market just from a racing standpoint, and are excited about the prospects of what that project could mean here in Plymouth.
Well, I remember I actually went over to Suffolk Downs, and it's like dying days, like maybe this was 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't know how I found myself out there, but I walked through it, and boy, it was sad. Like to see any business fail, which is basically what it does. And at one time, horse racing was the number one sport, I think, in the country at one time. But that's been decades. Yeah. And I remember when I was a kid, we had horse racing at the Marshfield Fair, which is not too far away. Probably not what you have at this Saturday, right? This Saturday is a big weekend for you, Vince. What is it? There's a lot of people in town. This is not a horse racing state, but what's this Saturday?
Well, we've got the Kentucky Derby. The first Saturday in May is when really the eyes of the world are on our sport, and the other Commonwealth, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where I'm from, and the glorious racing that we'll have this weekend at Churchill Downs down there.
So obviously, you being from Kentucky, Kentucky's a horse state. I mean, you think of Kentucky, you think I just looked at the map just to double check. I've actually never been to Kentucky. Been to Tennessee. I've been to all the states around it, but somehow I miss Kentucky. But, I think of Kentucky as beautiful farms, beautiful grass. I think of horses and bourbon. Not that I drink, but, that's what I think of. And it's part of the culture in Kentucky. It's not here.
It is. I mean, it's part of our lifestyle, and it is such a big economic driver for what it means to Kentucky and Kentuckians. And really, it is horses and bourbon from that standpoint on really what we're known for. But there are a lot of similarities to the geography, the topography, and the things that we've got in Kentucky here to Massachusetts, and as well as from a regulatory and statutory structure on what the potential is and the regulation of the sport and how it's governed.
So, if you were to build what is proposed at Exit 5 based upon the RFP that you sent in to the county, what type of jobs would that create? Now, let me just finish my quote. I think there's two types of jobs. There's the short-term construction jobs, and then there's the long-term jobs at the facility. So, tell us a little bit about what that would be.
Yeah, so just from a construction and that phase of the initial phases would be several hundred construction jobs that would go in to building the facility, and that's just if we have the racetrack as the anchor. That doesn't count all the ancillary facilities that we hope to include as a part of the development. And then permanent jobs, again, you're looking at anywhere from 150 to 220 year-round full-time jobs that are part of our hospitality and management business pieces that we would have as a part of that, not counting all of the temporary and seasonal staff that you need when you're doing racing. But there's also, you have to factor in the amount of impact that any facility like this, any economic development project, has a number of ancillary jobs that come with it. So supporting the downtown businesses, supporting all the restaurants, the lawyers that get employed doing contracts and deals with horses, the bankers.
You don't need any more lawyer jobs. Come on, Vince.
Well, we need to keep the ones we have. You don't want any more. You don't want lawyers out of work either.
I think you've got a couple of lawyers on the other side that are already they're happy that you're in town.
But there's so many ancillary jobs and spillover effect with anything that's of this magnitude.
All right, and so tax revenue, do we have an estimate on, if you build this racetrack, what would this mean to the bottom line of the town of Plymouth?
We're still working through those numbers. We don't want to create false hopes on something that we can't measure up to. So we're still working through our feasibility studies and seeing what kind of economic impact that we will provide once we hear from the town folk and make sure that we're putting the types of facilities on the project that is wanted and needed. So we don't have any firm numbers that we're ready to announce, just because we don't want to create false expectations. But we do think that it will create a significant amount of tourism dollars, tax revenue, sales tax, occupational tax, all the things that would go to benefiting the overall structure here in town.
Now, I'm just thinking, I should have thought about this earlier, but I'm just thinking kind of off the top of my head. When I think of large commercial, maybe you can help us out with this, Lauren, large commercial projects in town, I'm thinking Colony Place is the largest. Is there this could be on that scale. Give me an idea, Lauren.
Well, firstly, I think it's important to kind of set the perspective here on this, is that we're pretty much a developer that is coming in, engaging the community before we've even signed a lease, and discussing with the community on May 11th, coming up in the next week and a half, with the community, introducing ourselves to them, giving them the rough concept that we're saying, and basically stating that we don't have anything written in concrete yet. So this would be like Pine Hills coming in, which was a 3,000-acre development.
But that's residential.
No, it's residential and commercial.
Okay.
You have commercial you have commercial golf courses there. You have an entire village center full of businesses,
Yeah.
And it's the size of the town of Avon. So when we look at what that process was in the public meetings that got to, allowing something on the commercial scale of Pine Hills, it was a long planning process. And that's where we're saying is we're at the very front end of that. And to Vince's point, we're not committed to any final picture of what that looks like, except for the fact of the matter that what's driving the initial design and planning is a thoroughbred racetrack with ancillary uses yet to be determined. So in regards to the shops at 5, you're really looking at kind of an old zoning dodo bird, in my opinion, because the type of commercial malls that existed 20 years ago when that development was conceived, now look at it with 90% of its parking lots empty buildings. So what we're providing Plymouth is really an opportunity not to look at just the county woodlot, but the entire area and the economics, infrastructure, and the like, and how can we create a new economic tourism development engine for Plymouth and southeastern Massachusetts.
All right, so being in real estate, and this will be a shameless self-promotion for Jack Gately Real Estate, jackgately.com. The whole idea of shopping plazas, we've seen a massive shift in this, kind of like reversal, where the indoor shopping plaza, like we had up at Exit 9, that is definitely gone by the wayside. We've seen the Hanover Mall be leveled, and the outdoor shopping plaza where you park in front of the store, like Shops at Five is actually kind of like that. And obviously, Colony Place is like that, Derby Street. The outdoor ones are so much more popular. Nobody wants to go to a mall anymore. All right, so we're still undecided on the tax revenue. Let's take a step back, aside from the proposal itself. I know William O'Connell, who's part of you. I don't know him personally, but I certainly know of his name, being a former Quincy resident and seeing many of his projects and Granite Links, and I'm aware of some of the other projects he's done in Quincy. But tell us a little bit about your team.
Well, really, we have a very diverse group. Quite honestly, I've got more of the horse racing and development background from that standpoint. Done a number of projects down in Kentucky, as you mentioned. Will O'Connell has done a number of development projects, mixed use and multifamily, as well as golf course developments. Billy Woodfield's part of our group as well. Billy's he's got a finance background and worked really strongly with us on the numbers standpoint. And then Jimmy Bristol, who's a local guy as well, and fifth generation Corey family that is big in the building business, and done a number of planned developments in neighboring communities as well.
So I want to pick up on something that both of you, each one of you said. It was like a very interesting point. It said you hadn't actually signed the lease yet. So that's news to me, because I actually thought you had signed the lease, and I thought I saw a $25,000 check stub somewhere in something somewhere. So are you saying that you have not signed a lease? I thought we had a lease for like 3 years and then an option. So tell us a little bit of where we are exactly, if you can disclose.
Yeah,
do we have an inked lease?
Yeah, well, this is the interesting part of what when government land comes up for sale or lease. There's a law under the Massachusetts general laws, procurement laws, in the process by which land can be leased or sold. And basically, the county has been following that process. It started back in, I believe, January, when they filed the original RFP. There was a time period for that to go through the request for proposal. And basically, out of seven people that groups that pulled the RFP, we were the only one to return it. 5 were housing developers, 2 of them were affordable housing developers, and 1 was a gravel operation, and ourselves, Boston South, was the final. That being said, on March 31st, the county reviewed all the RFPs, of which there was just one, and voted to award us that RFP. So at that point is when this became more of a public event. But the process was still not over. So after that process of awarding us the RFP, they then have to go through the process of having a public hearing, which will be on May 9th, where the public will be able to go in and comment on their actions for that. And then on June 23rd would be the actual signing of the lease. Now, the lease basically has several components to it. First, the lease allows us to have 90 days due diligence, just like any purchase of real estate, as you would know, in which you would do 21Es or environmental inspections, soil tests, title searches, and the like, to make sure that the property is what it was represented to be and that it's clear of any clouds on its property.
Basically, the effectively a home inspection for commercial real estate.
Exactly.
Okay.
At the end of that 90 days, which would be September of this year, we would then make the decision on the 22nd whether to engage in the first component of what would actually be an 80-year lease. And that would be 3 years due diligence to do planning, permitting, public outreach, traffic studies, environmental studies, all the things that go with any particular project prior to it even filing any development proposal, permits, or zoning changes, or anything that might be required. At the end of that 3 years, 2 to 3 years, we would then negotiate based on what those plans actually are, i.e., would it be the Thoroughbred horse track, hotels, sports facilities, all the like? What would that look like? What would be the construction time? And then what would be the revenue generated? Now, I want to digress back to what the RFP was for. And that basically it was for the county, Plymouth County, to look to monetize its asset, to look towards a long-term revenue stream to fund Plymouth County and its services over the next 80 years. And so That's what we filed to do, saying that our anchor would be a thoroughbred horse track, but there will be many other uses and many other ways to generate revenue. Important to note that the amount of revenue it's generated over the past 200 years, zero, because the county government is exempt from taxes. And one of the things that's been going out there is saying that Plymouth won't get any taxes. Whether or not the county land is exempt from taxes, we have already publicly stated multiple times that we will pay our fair share of property taxes. And Vince could probably speak to it because he also is from a Commonwealth and actually worked on a facility that's on a county land and had a similar situation where they paid their taxes.
So it will be taxes, or it will be a payment in lieu of taxes, is what you're committing to.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The pilot program works great, and it's something that we're committed to doing to make sure that the county and the town receive their fair share.
And just to be clear, I mean, it's a pretty, and anybody who can go to Foxborough and look at Gillette, stadiums are not the whole thing. We don't build stadiums as just a shell with parking lots around them. That is like 1970s theory. And if you go to Gillette, you can see some stores and hotels. They're right there. And in Miami, just recently, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they just proposed a brand new stadium there. And I mean, it's going to be a giant multi-use facility so that you're not just generating revenue on game days, that it's more of the stadium is part of it, but not all of it. That's what you're saying, that this is going to be something that will be utilized, not just when the horses are running around the track.
Absolutely. From a programming standpoint, we want the facility and the property to be used as many days as we can, whether that's incorporating some convention center type space, meeting space, any of those sorts of things that continue to drive traffic to the property. And to even further your stadium analogy, I think one of the biggest differences, especially with this project and what you see with most stadiums, is we're not asking for anything from the county or the town or the state. This will be a privately funded development, so the things that we do on the site, the construction and those sorts of things will be privately funded. Whereas a lot of times you see with stadiums that there's a matching component, or the county or the state builds them, then leases them back to a developer or to the tenant. This is a private development. We just happen to be in a really great situation where you have undeveloped land that's owned by the county that's currently not producing any tax revenue, and we're coming in and hopefully going to work out a scenario that is helpful to everybody and creates more revenue and growth for the community.
And the first 3 years, as I understand, you're putting some pretty good money up to do this due diligence, the 21E, everything. You have an estimate of over $5 million for that. Mm-hmm. And then the plan, according to the RFP, is to invest $500 million, which would, as you said, would be privately financed, half cash up front. That's a big chunk of change. That's a big investment, and you're not asking for state, federal, or local taxes revenue for that.
That's correct.
You know, and one of the things I think it's important too, and I think the selectmen have taken a lot of heat for merely voting for us to spend our own money at our own risk to figure out a lot of how we can make things better for Plymouth. And we got a quick quote that this project of $500 million would translate into just about $7.5 to $8 million in tax revenue just in property value alone at full build-out. That's interesting to note because next year, because of deregulation and the closing of the power plant and the decommissioning of it, Plymouth stands to lose about $7 million a year. And what are the choices for the taxpayers? Either increase taxes or cuts in services. So, what we're trying to put on the table here is not the whole solution. And certainly it's not an overnight solution, but as Plymouth looks to its future, there has to be balanced growth and development.
Let me just interrupt. Did you ever have a discussion with the county, pull them aside and say, hey, pal, why don't you just sell it to us? Because one of my reservations is the county's still involved. Not for nothing, but I would just prefer that the county go away like it went away in, I don't know if you know this, Vince, but most counties in Massachusetts were dissolved a good 20 years ago. Plymouth County as a governmental entity is just hanging on by it doesn't really exist in any, this is going to be offensive to some people, in meaningful way. It's a relic. And I understand how it exists down the Cape as a certain thing, but here it's like the county, it's still a thing? Like nobody even knew. And I have a master's degree in public management. and I didn't even know it was still a thing in Plymouth. Did you think about buying it? Did you ever kind of like whisper, "Hey, can we buy this?"
No, just because the way that the county had set up the process from the RFP and the land that was available, we wanted to do the path of least resistance and what we thought was most beneficial to the county, and we followed the process that they set up. So the idea to purchase the property really never really came up.
You know, because from my point of view, I look at it and I say, well, heaven forbid you get all this thing approved and you're going along and it's 20, 30 years or whatever and the business model changes and things go down. Now the county's stuck with some type of facility and they're on the hook for it. So just like generations from now, that's a concern to me. But we'll see how that goes. My next question for you is, as I think probably one of the biggest regulatory hurdles, at least as I look at it, and if you think there's a bigger one, you let me know. But at looking at it, and I'm going to use raw numbers here, but about 20% of it is zoned as light industrial. And I might be off on the percentage, but approximately. And 80% of it is zoned as rural residential. So in order to do this, you need a big zoning change. How are you going to handle that?
Well, first off, in regards to zoning change, simply put, if I bring back Pine Hills again. Originally, Pine Hills was zoned completely rural residential. Now, it's a town under itself, a town within a town. And that happened through the planning process of bringing the community along, step by step, analyzing the environmental impacts, the traffic impacts, the tax revenue that it would generate. Back then, we were looking to replace the $15 million cut in taxes we were getting from the energy plant. We went through that process, and then the town finally accepted it, voted for it overwhelmingly. We're talking about a very similar process, if we need zoning changes, that we're going to go through with the community, that when we go to make the case that before we start development, that the town is going to be with us. And I believe confidently that Plymouth is. When it's presented the facts and the reality in front of them with real data, not just fear or fear of the unknown that we're seeing right now because we just come out of the gate, so to speak. That once Plymouth is presented with all the facts of how this is going to work and how we're going to fit into this community and benefit it, I think they're going to come along and support it. I feel confident.
Let me follow up with you on the community thing. So you have this big meeting. It's May 11th. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And that's a townwide thing.
We've invited all 27 towns because remember, this is not just Plymouth's asset. It's an asset that belongs to 27 towns in a city.
All right. Let's take a micro look at it.
Yep.
From the micro look at it, like the abutters.
Yes.
Have you had, or do you plan to have small meetings with like the residential abutters? In your RFP, you actually proposed buying a couple of parcels, including a parcel that has an existing ongoing business. Full disclosure, I know who those people are. And have you had micro meetings with these people? Because if I was running a business on that parcel, and all of a sudden I saw this proposal that they want to buy where I'm doing business, I'd be surprised. So if you had like little community meetings, or would you commit to that?
Oh, well, if you read the RFP, our mitigation process and public outreach is extensive. And it mirrors very similarly what I've talked about with other projects that have come in Plymouth. And yes, we have already started outreaching to local neighbors. And as I say, once we get to the point in June where we actually sign a lease and we're committed into the project, then that process is going to begin in earnest. May 11th is really just an introduction to kind of set the stage and set the record straight of exactly what that process is, because there's a lot of confusion and misinformation out there right now because we haven't even had a chance to tell our side. This is actually one of the first opportunities to speak with someone from the community and get the message out of exactly what's going on here. So we intend May 11th to be as much as an introduction and just kind of here's our concept, but it is much more, I think, Vince has a saying, engage on the front end. We're engaging away on the front end before we've even signed the lease to ask the community, what are its concerns? What would it like to see? What does it not want to see? And start to build that information base for which we have to then take that and start and design our planning process based on that initial introduction to the community.
So in talking about that, some people are still, I don't know what the phrase is, but they're still a little whiplashed from Vince about 12 to 15 years ago, or whenever it was. There was this proposal to take some golf course, as I recollect, and create a movie studio. It's going to be called Hollywood East. It was going to be great because Jennifer Aniston was going to live right next door to me. We were going to be friends. And then it all blew up as a scam. Tell me this is not one of those things.
No, this is definitely not one of those things. And I think, to Loring's point, next week really is our chance to listen. I mean, we're going to be listening more than we're going to be talking at the meeting next week, because I think it's important to get that community feedback. What are people's concerns? What do people want? Because we are very much in the early stages on this, so we can design and we can build to meet the community's needs. But this is definitely not a scam, and we're willing to listen to anybody at any point. You know, as we work through this process, we know there's lots of different voices to be heard, and we're willing to listen to them in whatever format and whatever way that people have. We're here to answer those questions and help dispel a lot of those myths.
Well, let's follow up with that, Vince. So one of the significant concerns that people have spoken about is a casino, and most certainly the state of Massachusetts is moving towards more gambling. We just had, within the last week or so, the sports gambling bill passed on Beacon Hill. Will there ever be a casino, or would you commit yourself to some type of deed restriction which would prohibit a casino?
As of right now, there are no plans for a full casino the way that it is currently designed in Massachusetts. The state and the Commonwealth have very strict guidelines on investment numbers and policies and procedures in that regard. So we would not envision a full casino at this time on the site. But I don't want to commit that 20 years from now, if something were to change and the tender allow it, or the facilities need it, or the community desire it, I wouldn't want to handcuff us into any future development. But as of right now, there's no plans for that. If sports wagering does pass, we would want to become a sports and entertainment destination. So to your point earlier about, programming and making sure we've got people coming, you can sit and bet on your phone in your living room now. So, depending on what kind of gambling you want to do. And so we want to be able to take advantage of that and provide the atmosphere from an entertainment and a wagering standpoint. So that if it passes, that's something that we would apply for and hopefully get on the sports wagering side. But as of right now, there are no plans for a full casino on the site.
Okay, so let me follow up with the next question then. A couple of years ago, and actually I'll just say, when you came in here, we were joking about how Massachusetts is different than Kentucky from a cultural point of view quite a bit. A couple of years ago, by popular referendum in the state, they passed a law that said, and this is going to be pejorative, but basically that every chicken and every egg sold in Massachusetts had to be basically a free-range egg, and then and it passed overwhelmingly, like flying colors. And then reality struck when they realized that the dollar value of that was going to be like an egg was now going to cost you like $3 an egg or something like that. And the people on Beacon Hill, whoa, wait a second, we have to change that. So this is a state that banned greyhound racing, if I recollect right. That was probably 20-something years ago, and it's not the same culture as Kentucky relative to horse racing, and there have been some concerns locally about horse racing as kind of like people are morally opposed to it. For the people that are not morally opposed to it, but are also concerned about animal safety, and there has been some issues with horse racing in the very recent past. In fact, the number one guy, the biggest celebrity, the Michael Jordan of horse racing, is not at the Kentucky Derby this weekend. So, and that's mostly because of allegations about how the horses were treated. So, how's the industry responding to that?
Well,
what is it?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And I would tell you that some of those dynamics that have forced us to change as a business and as an industry, we are a better sport and a safer sport than what we were even 3 years ago. let alone 20 years ago. And so the strides that we're making and the things that we're doing from a care and just an oversight mechanisms for all of those horses before they enter the track for training or for racing is light years of what it was less than a decade ago. And I would also tell
But
you,
we still have problems. I mean, the problem is we have this spate
Sure.
of horse deaths. We have, I can't remember the guy, Gabbert.
Bob Baffert.
Baffert.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with your name, forgive me.
Yeah.
I mean, he's banned, right?
Yeah, so he's currently serving a 9-day suspension based on results from last year's Kentucky Derby, which he had a positive drug sample as an overage from that standpoint. But I would tell you that those enforcement mechanisms, the reason that he's not at the Kentucky Derby is the reason that is one of the testament to the things that our sport is doing to do a better job.
So you're saying that's an example of how we are doing better.
It is.
Okay.
It is. It absolutely is.
You basically banned Lance Armstrong.
It is a very similar situation, and making sure that we're providing a clean product and a product that has great integrity.
All right, so I have one more question for you, but before I do that, let me just throw it out. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
One of the other issues that people have been concerned about is the environmental impact on the site.
Okay.
And if they look at the environmental impact study that we provided, we're providing mitigation that no other developer in Massachusetts has ever done before. We're actually looking at, and we own additional land in Plymouth, that we may potentially provide acre for acre, or if not more, preservation in what is really an environmentally sensitive area with the potential of a public drinking water source for South Plymouth. That's never been done before, as far as I know, in the state, where someone's come in and said, we're going to develop an area that's already an industrial park, that's already surrounded by industrial uses, next to a wastewater treatment plant, but we're still going to take that amount of land and set aside somewhere else. That's not been part of the story, and no one has brought that up. That's something that I think is unique that we're bringing to the table. And not only that, the design standards that we're going to hold ourselves to on the site is going to enhance the site from what it is now, which is basically a fragmented open space with power line easements that are stripped down to bare dirt. It's pretty much a haven for illegal motorcycle racing through the property all weekends long, and we're looking to mitigate that through some of the most leading standards of environmental design for low impact design to protect the aquifer and to provide public open space and the like. And we haven't had a chance to get that on the table, but we will. And I think as the public hears it, and about the buffers for the neighbors at Tall Pines, over 300 feet we've already said that we've looked at to buffer them. Typically, you don't even notify someone that's over 300 feet of a development project when it files a permit. So we're pushing the standards of any other development that's come in. We're going to be pushing those standards far beyond and setting the bar far higher for ourselves than currently exists for any other development. I think that's important to say. Not only just with the ethics of how they're going to treat the horses and the safety of the racers, because Vince's model it'll be the only one of its kind in the country on how they monitor and protect those horses in those races. This is a state-of-the-art, world-class sports, racing, and entertainment venue, unlike anything Massachusetts has ever seen before. That's what we're proposing. That's our initial concept, and we're looking to work with the community as we move forward to make that a reality.
And this other land is a piece of land that you had at one time considered locating something like this in the past, right?
No, this other piece of property that we have is rural residential land that's potentially ripe for residential development in the middle of the woods along a river. And as we move forward, people will see this land and they'll see what I'm speaking is true, that this is a piece of land that should be preserved and protected, and we're putting it all on the table. Like, we are willing to work and negotiate with the town and the state, because we also have to go through a lot of state regulation as we move forward with this. We've got MEPA reviews, we've got, state regulations, state licenses. There's not just a one-stop shop and we're up and running. This is a long public process with many points of regulatory hurdles that we have to go forward, go over. And we're up to meeting that challenge. And I think we're going to come in with something that people will be, from what they think they know right now to what reality will play out over the next few years, is going to be something spectacular.
All right, so my second to last question now is for Vince. Vince, with that type of vision, what do you know about us that we don't know in regards to our appetite, our desire to go see thoroughbred racing? I mean, what type of market research? Why do you think that this is a good? Because it hadn't dawned on me, but maybe there's something that you know that I don't know, or that we don't know. I bet you there is.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think it's more of just the sports culture that exists here in Massachusetts. There's no question. You take the passion that you have for the Patriots, the Bruins, the Celtics. I'm a lifelong Celtics fan myself. The fact that you have that culture of sports here and what exists in this marketplace makes this a perfect fit for creating a destination for a sport that everybody else can get around as well. And the fact that there is not any live racing here currently shows that it's an unmet need. There's a gap in the market from a racing standpoint. When you look at, take Massachusetts out of it and the culture out of it, but just from a market, there's a gap that exists here. And we feel like that the timing is right for bringing something that everybody can be proud of, that's a lot of fun and enjoyable to watch, and really build on that sports culture.
You'd have to go to some place like Saratoga for something similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And we think that this could have a very, very similar Saratoga feel. When you walk in downtown Plymouth, the shops and the restaurants and it has a very Saratoga feel to it. And we feel like that same vibe and that same vibrancy can be brought here.
All right, so the most important question, Vince, the race is Saturday. What's your pick? You whisper it. We won't tell anybody.
Oh, you can tell whoever.
All right, what's your pick for the race?
I'm going. Even though he's the morning line favorite, I'm going with Zandon on top. But I like Taiba to run underneath. So I would do a Zandon Taiba exacta box.
Okay, Lauren.
I will tell you that the last time I had experience with horses, I was going around in circle with organ music behind me. So I wouldn't know who to bet on, to be honest with you.
All right, my pick is easy. It's Happy Jack, 30-1, but I'm going Happy Jack. You picked the favorite, 3-1.
I did.
All right, well, hey, great. We've been talking with Lauren Tripp and Vince Gabbert of the, let's see if we can get the company name right, Boston South Real Estate and Development Group, about the proposal to build a racetrack off of Exit 5. I'm your host, Jack Gately of the 1620 Today podcast. You can join us at 1620today.com, on Spotify, or on YouTube. Thank you for watching it. If you like the show, hit the share button. Thanks for watching. Beth will be back on our next episode.